Hi guys, this is Mr. Tan, and today we're looking at business strategy, and we're going to be reviewing aspects of the value chain and benchmarking, and kind of linking it to the business and success and uniqueness of the business. Strategic positioning and organizational audit. So we're going to be looking at the internal analysis, benchmarking, value chain. Obviously, the internal analysis we've kind of covered in other videos in terms of a SWOT analysis, and we've also covered Porter's 5 forces and Pestel. But even though Pestel is an external environment analysis, so we're not going to be looking at Porter's 5 force model or even a SWOT analysis. So the positioning audit, is part of the planning process, which examines the current state of the entity in terms of where the company is in relation to its competitors, its market, and other factors. So a wide range of factors is examined. You need to really look at the resources of tangible and intangible assets, tangible possible to touch on or treated as fact, products, brands, and markets. Operating systems such as production and distribution, internal organization, current results, and financial resources. You may ask the question, well, why is this so important? Well, this should be quite obvious to you because ultimately the business is there in the private sector to make a profit, and whether it's a sole trader, a partnership, a private limited company or public limited company, they're there to meet the needs of either the owners or the shareholders who own the company. So in order to do that, you have to manage obviously your cash flow, and you have to manage the resources that you have, because that has a direct impact and influence on your profit and loss account. Your profit and loss account in terms of the expenses of the P&L account that will affect the net profit, as well as the cost of goods sold in terms of your opening stock minus closing stock. Take away from your sales gives you your gross profit. So your cost of goods, your suppliers, all the expenses in your company, operating systems, and those costs are going to be reflected there, which obviously lead to you having a net profit or not, which then, as we know, you take off your corporation tax, and then your dividends to shareholders, if any are being paid out, and what is left is retained earnings, and those retained earnings, as we know, go into the balance sheet in terms of the sources of equity, and the equity plus total liabilities equals total assets being fixed assets plus total current assets. So all these issues have a direct impact in terms of the profitability of the business, and so they need to be managed if a company are going to have the resources and the cash flow to last the long term. So very, very important. So we're going to be looking at internal analysis tools, including benchmarking and the value chain. And I'm sure we've covered some areas of this before, but we're going to just touch on this again. So internal analysis, where the organization is right now through audits. Audits are an examination of records or financial accounts to check their accuracy. An adjustment or correction of accounts, and an examined and verified account. And again, there will always be mistaken counts. If we look at years back with the financial accounts for Tesco's, they had missing a couple £100 million. How on earth did they have a couple £100 million missing in their accounts? Resource audit. Resource audit, is a review of all aspects of the resources the organization uses, including both the physical and financial resources. Can you give any example of these? Can you think? What are some of the physical and financial resources? So examples of some of these resources include materials, human resources, management, fixed assets, working capital, finance, intangible assets, the organization, knowledge in terms of knowledge, which is, you can make your processes and procedures become more efficient or less efficient, more productive or less productive, and therefore saving you more money and making you more efficient and in terms of the amount of profit that you're making. Suppliers, your skills and turnover, career progression, Technology up to date. Credit. The ability to borrow, very important. We've seen with COVID-19 now, so many businesses around the world, whether they be in the tourism and hospitality industry or elsewhere, have suffered. And the question really they need to ask themselves is, yes, even though there is a vaccine coming, will they be able to survive without government support? Even if they have government support, will they be able to survive? And it all comes down to cash flow. Do they have the cash flow there to survive this COVID-19? So the ability to borrow. Brands, culture, and innovation. So all these resources are going to have a direct or indirect impact upon the profit and loss ability of a company's organization accounts. So resources can add value to an organization, such as employees with skills and knowledge add value to the business, because then that can either increase or decrease productivity if you're comparing one business to another. Customers purchase value, which they measure by comparing a firm's products and services with familiar offerings by competitors. Okay? The business creates value by carrying out its activities either more efficiently than other businesses or combine them in such a way as to provide a unique product or service. So, what we're saying is that obviously the resources can add value to the organization, but we're looking at this in terms of comparing it to what the competitors do as well. So with skills and knowledge and add value, customers purchase value, which they measure by comparing a firm's products. So analysis of the internal environment. So we've got benchmarking, and you may, what is benchmarking, and where does this fit into the business? Well, benchmarking is the process, of identifying and comparing an organization's own best practice in relation to both products and the process by which these products are created and delivered. The search for best practice can take place both inside a particular industry and also in other industries. For example, are there lessons to be learned from other industries? We're going to come on to this later and look at some examples. The objective of benchmarking is to understand and evaluate the current position of a business or organization in relation to best practice and to identify areas and means of performance improvement. So, can we do this? Can we look at what's happening outside, even if we look at in terms of principles such as just in time, continuous improvement, lean? Can we take these principles? We saw that just in time was first seen within the car manufacturing industry, which we're going to talk more about later. But we see now that other industries and other market sectors are using this. If we take, for instance, Zara in the clothing industry, again turning over almost £20 billion a year, is using just in time. Why benchmarking? Well, benchmarking for performance improvement, for creative thinking. Are we there or thereabouts? How do we compare to the industry? Keep pace with science and technology changes. Are we keeping pace? Is there a corporate culture and company philosophy to do this? Meeting companies' expectations. Compete with competitive markets. Innovation in management methods. And meeting quality standards. Total quality management, TQM, which brings in methods for TQM linked to CI, continuous improvement, at 3 different levels, and also lean and various other total quality management principles. Benchmarking continue. This is the establishment through data gathering of targets and comparisons. Those whose relative levels of performance can be identified. By doing this, best practice can be identified for the business or industry. But again, if you think about TQM and implementing TQM tools for solving problems, for identifying problems, and for monitoring performance, yes, we can do this. But what do you think is the potential downside of this? So we know the potential upside of this and what it could lead to: better standards, more productivity, more efficiency. What are the downsides? Well, some of the downsides of doing this is that it's constant change, and is putting in more systems and processes to monitor everything. It's about data gathering and data analysis, and then looking at the data and then saying, how can we change things? How can we improve things? So it's a very difficult thing to do on a continuous basis if you've got all the pressures of the work, having to meet all your other activities as well as these activities. So it is daunting, definitely. So benchmarking involves looking outwards, a particular business, organization, industry, region, or country, to examine how others, achieve their performance levels and to understand the process they use. In this way, benchmarking helps to explain the process behind, excellent performance. When the lessons learned from a benchmarking exercise are applied appropriately, they facilitate improved performance in critical functions in an organization or in the key areas of the business environment. So again, absolutely, definitely. Benchmarking, application of benchmarking involves 4 key steps. Understand in detail existing business processes. Absolutely key to understanding how you can improve things and to how to benchmark. You've got to understand the business process before you can do it. Analyze the business process, of other companies, and see how they do things. Compare own business performance with that of others analyzed. Implement the steps necessary to close the performance gap. So benchmarking should not be considered as a one-off exercise, but to be effective, it must be an ongoing, integral part of the ongoing improvement process, with the goal of keeping abreast of ever-improving best practice, CI, continuous improvement. Types of, benchmarking, you've got internal, the method of comparing, one operating unit or function with another within the same industry. You've got functional operation, generic. Internal functions are compared with those of best external practitioners of the functions, regardless of the industry. Competitive. Information is gathered about direct competitors. Strategic. A type of competitive benchmarking aimed at strategic action and organizational change. Even if we look at Toyota. Now, if we compare the motor industry, after the Second World War, the Japanese industries were devastated. And McCarthy, the chief at that time in that area in the Pacific, led people into Japan with various methods and quality methods which he implemented over in Japan. And one of the things were various principles like Kaizen type principles and implementing systems, processes, and practices. And one of the things that the manufacturing car industry faced was the breakdown of machinery. And normally you had employees working on a station, and then employees would be moved around different stations. And this was, the same for both manufacturing car industries at that time in both in the US and in Japan. And what used to happen was the machines used to break down, and because the machines used to break down, now it meant that that machine couldn't be used, that member of staff couldn't be used, so that was unproductive. The machine couldn't be used, so that was unproductive. And then you had to wait to get someone to fix the machine, and then the machine would be fixed, and then the machine would break down again. And this was an ongoing process that happened in both in the US and in Japan in the car industries. But what Toyota did was they actually started to have a diary, a book, and they tried to they kept one member of staff, an employee, on one machine, so that member of staff was responsible for that one machine. And they asked each of their employees to keep a notebook in terms of what was happening during the day, and when the machine broke down, and when they called someone, what happened, and how long it took, and then when they fixed the machine, how long the machine worked until it broke down again, and so on and so forth. So they did this diary, and then with the employees being responsible for that machinery, they found out that employees didn't really want to wait until someone came to fix the machine because it took some time. So then the employees started to go into the machines and say what had happened when it had broken down. And eventually they found out why the machines were breaking down. And the reason why was because of dust. So dust was getting in the machines and causing the machines to clog up and then to stop. So what the employees did was they built some dust guards, and the dust guards were now put around the machines to stop the dust going in the machines. And then they started to expand this and then put dust free areas throughout the whole of the production site. And then they decided to have dust free sites from the outside, so that when the lorries were coming in with the component parts, then they would stop at a certain point, and then they would be offloaded into an area rather than going straight in, taking a lot of dust in with them. And this helped improve the efficiency of their machines to such a degree that, in comparison to the US car industries, they were not doing this. And so these machines in Japan were now being more productive, they were more efficient, and their labor was being more productive and more efficient because they were being all utilized, in comparison to the US car manufacturing industry at that time, who had not implemented this kind of system of continuous improvement to meet the company's overall objectives. Then now, because they're being more efficient and effective, it's reduced their expenses and allowed them to be able to maintain their net profit, but at the same time reducing the cost of the retail prices of their cars, still maintaining their gross margins on each car sold. That gave them a competitive advantage over the US car industries in terms of the retail prices of cars. If you look at another kind of like benchmarking type activity that Toyota implemented, was just in time. So rather than having a warehouse, rather than having a warehouse manager, rather than having employees in the warehouse, rather than having systems in the warehouse, rather than having rent to pay for the warehousing space, they decided to integrate their suppliers with their organization, so the suppliers only sold and manufactured components for Toyota. Now, they would deliver at a certain date, on a certain time, within a certain time period, and offload those goods within a given time. And then those component parts would go straight into the production line and go straight on to make a car. So therefore, again, Toyota saved all these costs. So these are the activities that we can see here that are absolutely, crucial for making an industry success. And if the US car manufacturing industry didn't follow suit in terms of these benchmarking efficiencies and levels, then they wouldn't have survived. So other car manufacturers would have to also implement just in time, would also have to do continuous improvement and lean, and look at all these management type principles in order to remain competitive. Otherwise they would be out of business. So other benchmarking includes in terms of the product, the process, and the performance. Levels of benchmarking, set objectives and determine the areas to benchmark. Establish key performance indicators. So select in an organization to study and measure your own and others' performance. And you should try and compare these performance. And then, can you think, either individually or in pairs, how to design and implement improvement program and monitor improvements? Well, what would this mean for the organization? What would you need to do in order to do this? Let's say you identified an organization and you identified the industry standards. How would you then get this implemented within your company? Think about that. So now we're looking at the value chain analysis. So we're looking at McKinsey 7S in terms of their value chain analysis. So the value chain analysis describes the activities that take place in a business that relates them to an analysis of the competitive strength of the business. Influential work by Michael Porter suggested that the activities of a business could be grouped under two headings, the primary activities and the supporting activities. A firm can secure competitive advantage in several ways. Invent new or better ways to do activities. Combine activities in new and better ways. Manage the linkages in its own value chain. Manage the linkages in the value system. So obviously we've seen McKinsey's 7S value chain before, And so you have the primary activities and the supporting activities. So the primary activities include the inbound in terms of quality control, receiving the raw materials control, supply schedules. The operation side, examples: manufacturing, packaging, production, quality control, maintenance. And it's here within the operation system is where you can implement a lot of these techniques in terms of total quality management, in terms of continuous improvement, in terms of lean. You can, within the operation, to make yourselves more efficient and productive. Okay. Outbound logistics examples: finishing goods, order handling, dispatch, delivery, invoicing. And even if we look at the example in terms of operation and outbound logistics, if we compare this to Tesco's, we can see that Tesco's are also trying to cut down their expenses within their operations. They have to, because they lost 10% of their market share in the last 10 years against Aldi and Lidl. But they have bounced back by buying Booker's, and they are looking at opening up new stores to compete with Lidl and Aldi called Jack's. But even within their operations, they're trying to cut costs. So they've implemented cross-docking systems. So they will sell a 50-inch TV screen, but they won't stock it and they won't hold it. They will take the order over the website or take the order in store, and have products in store, and then send out the order once they've taken the cash or the credit card value. They would then send this order over to the manufacturing company, and the manufacturing company will send it out direct to the customer. So therefore, Tesco doesn't have to hold the stock, doesn't have to take it in, doesn't have to fork out for the stock in terms of monies until the order is actually placed, and then they already have those monies there to pay for the stock. So again, this is just one area of many areas that Tesco's have done to make their operations and their outbound logistics more efficient and effective. Sales and marketing examples: management, order taking, promotion, sales analysis, market research. Again, very important. Sales and marketing, do you have a fully e-commerce website that you deliver to people? Because we've seen over the last year, and probably for the next year, COVID-19 has seen more deliveries going by Amazon and by other companies than at any other time that we've seen it for 50 years. And so you have to say to yourself, are you maximizing your sales opportunities? If you look at a company like Primark, for instance, does not have a fully e-commerce website where they send out their goods and services to their customers direct. Now, all the times that are being closed because they're non-essential goods due to government restrictions, how many sales are they losing? They could have still been selling their goods online if they had a fully e-commerce website that was integrated to their business and operations. So again, they need to look at this. Servicing, warranties, maintenance, education and training upgrades. And then you have the supporting activities, supporting the primary activities. Supporting activities include the procurement, supplier management, funding, subcontracting, specification. And even if we look here, where do we go with this? If we think about strategies, if we look at Zara have vertically integrated backwards. They were one shop that started in Spain. Now they have over 2,000 shops. They have their own 85% of their own manufacturing base to supply their own stores, because they vertically integrated backwards. Do you rely on your own suppliers who are independent of your company, or do you want to vertically integrate backwards? What is your supporting activities? How have you looked at doing what other companies in the industry are doing? Product technology and development, product and process design, production, engineering, market testing, R&D. Again, if we come back to the car industry, we look at R&D. Toyota has invested huge sums of money in terms of their research and development in terms of investment into cars, electric cars, hybrid cars, completely electric cars. And again, this has come at the right time because of the environmental concerns. I'm sure car manufacturers will be looking at flying cars and self-flying cars and so on and so forth. Human resource management, procurement, personnel, labor recruitment, training, staff planning, and administration, financial infrastructure, the legal, accounting, financial management. Very important. your cash flow of your organization, your current assets, your asset test, your current assets divided by your current liabilities. Can you pay all your debts in your company? Because if you can't pay your short-term liabilities within 1 year, then you have the potential of being put out of business and going into liquidation. So again, very, very important. So when you're looking at all these primary and secondary activities using the McKinsey 7S value chain, all these kind of interlink. And even if you take earlier when we're talking about benchmarking within the operations, within the outbound logistics, and all over the business is important to try and reduce costs, even in the procurement of supplies, vertically integrating backwards. So very, very important. And they all lead to value added, less cost, gives you your profit margin. So this even says, your profit margin. It's all about the profit that you're making in the private sector. So, McKinsey 7S, individual research. Go online and carry out an individual research of McKinsey 7S and sum up the importance of 7 elements within the respect of strategic positioning and competition. Take a company. Tell me what you come up with. How can you apply this? So, thank you today from Mr. Tan.